Hello everybody, welcome back to another one, Ask the Old Stud. And this one is number 13. Can't believe that, we're past a dozen now. I guess we've done a whole year. We're started in the second year of these, and I want to thank everybody for your support, all the great comments that I get. And I know that a lot of people are enjoying these, and I actually enjoy doing them. So we've got a good one for you today. Got a lot of great questions again, I'm sure. Hadn't had a chance to look at them all, but I'm sure we've got a lot of knowledgeable fans out there, and so we're going to get to it right away, and we're going to get to it right now.
Our first question comes from Mark Cole, Newark, Delaware. A tangible question could be discussing the logistics of bicycling the TV show and the headaches of booking around what market saw which episode of TV. I think I've read that in larger territories, the TV could be 4 to 6 weeks behind the new episode shot that week.
That's a great question, Mark. Gosh, you've done a little study in here, man. I mean, not many people want to get that far into what business is all about, but when my first territory, Knoxville, we had about 5 stations, and we didn't. It was a lot less than a few years later. Quite a few years later, we got to Continental. We had more than close to 12, 15 stations. So. Yeah, and that's basically the way most territories worked. You didn't want to go out and buy individual tapes for every market you had so that you could keep everybody in the same week. Especially, it would be really expensive if you had a territory like Mid-Atlantic, for instance. Crockett's territory, wow, they must have had 20, 25 markets. So it would have just been horrible to... The cost of tapes alone would have been immense, and so yeah. I mean, there's a little study to it. I mean, obviously, if you're a booker, you need to know what TV that your particular town is getting, and if you've got a bunch of markets, then you've got to know exactly which ones are getting it. Well, if we look at Gulf Coast, when we first started with Gulf Coast down there, we basically only had 3 markets. Pretty quickly that jumped to about 6, but it was fairly easy with 3 markets to get it done and be able to know where you're at. And we tried basically to keep all 3 of those markets getting the same show the same week. Cost us a little bit extra money to do that, but it was well worth it, especially if you were the booker. You didn't have to sit there and decide, wow, what card do I put in this town? I don't even remember what the TV had on it that promoted this card. So, wow, but it's a good question, Mark. And not many people want to jump into that part of it. Not many people, I guess, really think about how difficult some of these things were for bookers and for owners of territories. You just made one TV show, thank goodness. You didn't have to make a bunch of TV shows. And that was the great thing about it, Mark, that changed the business for everybody. When you got away from those live TVs and they weren't able to tape the shows, imagine that. I remember in the Tennessee territory, I worked there for 2 weekends with my brother in 1971, I believe, 1970 or 71. And we worked live TVs. Went to Memphis, from Nashville in the morning to Memphis. We went from Memphis the same day to Chattanooga to TV. We wrestled in Chattanooga House Show. And then we went to Birmingham live TV at almost midnight on a Saturday night. So, wow, it was a lot less trouble, I guess, Mark, to have the system of having it taped and being able to put it on tape than it was to provide talent, make sure all those wrestlers got to all those television stations on time. And wow, what a bear that was. And so the business changed dramatically over those years. Once tape came in, it changed everything for everybody, and it made it a lot better business.
Our next question is from Gregory Rose, Pioneer, Tennessee. When you retired from the ring, did you know what you wanted to do next? And did you ever figure you'd have a Studcast or a TennesseeStud.com website?
Gregory, no. That's a pretty quick answer there. I mean, wow. I had no idea. I mean, when I quit and retired in 1988 from wrestling, I was really thought I was retired for life. I had no plans to do anything else. You know, I'd saved a little money and I'd worked real hard, and I was only 40 years old. So, you know, I was like, this is a little early to retire, but, and then, wow, out of nowhere came hockey, of all things, you know. I go to watch a game, and then all of a sudden, I'm in the hockey business. And so, you know, and then later on, I got retired again out of the hockey business. Did really well in hockey, and got a great deal when I sold, and I went to the Keys to live, and I retired again, and I stayed retired for about 5 years, and I got bored. I wrote a book, Brutus, and then I said, I kind of want to do something again. And I ended up, of all places then, the ADT, security business. It's like, I knew nothing about the security business. I knew nothing about hockey either, to be honest with you. But I learned real fast, and I learned real fast with the AD company, and I went about 12, 15 years, and then I retired again, and I thought, well, this is it, you know, I'm definitely done now, and I don't need to do anything anymore. And all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, I'll be darned if wrestling don't come back in my life, and I did a couple of little shows, the Jim Cornette's show, a couple of little podcasts, and people liked it. People, you know, they went nuts. They were like, "Gosh, Ron, Jesus, you're maybe the best that's ever been at this. I mean, you got to do this." And you know, I didn't really want to get back into wrestling, but you know, I finally said, "Well, what the heck, you know, I was doing 2 or 3 a week." You know, so might as well do my own, and I don't have to do everybody else's. So, you know, that's how I got into put the Studcast together, and really, really enjoyed it. It's been marvelous. It's been 6 years of it now, weekly. Gosh, I'm more than 300, way into the 300s at this point of episodes, and I have, like I said, a website, tnstud.com, and wow, got a lot going on. A YouTube page now, and just doing Ask the Stud right here. I'm doing one right here today. So, yeah, and I don't know how long this is going to last, and I'm kind of hoping this might be the end of it this time for sure. But I'm going to keep riding the horse, riding the old stud, man, until I figure out exactly what I'm going to do from here on.
Our next question is from Jonathan Myers, New York City, New York. Do you think there's a reason why so many Southern wrestlers also worked in law enforcement as well? Examples: Mongolian Stomper, Archie Goldie, Lord Humongous, Jeff Van Camp, Billy Wicks from Memphis, Jerry Stubbs from the Atlanta area, and the wrestling pro Leon Baxter.
Well, that's a great question, sir. From New York City. My golly. And asking about the old Southern boys. Jeez, man, you must have lived down south at one time or another there, Jonathan. Wow. I had never really thought about that, but I guess there's probably several reasons, got to be several reasons that happened. I mean, one of the things is wrestlers were great guys. They were good people. They were big-hearted, and they wanted to help people, and so I think that had a lot to do with it. You got to kind of have that want to be helpful, and to be a policeman or to be in any type of law enforcement. You got to want to kind of have that job, and and then the guys you mentioned, wow, all of them. I mean, Archie Goldie, Mongolian Stomper. I mean, wow, he was a natural cop. I mean, he was scared the heck out of you, man, if he showed up at your house, and he had respect. I don't doubt that nobody ever threw a punch at Archie when he came to take him to jail. I don't think that would have happened for darn sure. And so about Jeff Van Camp, Lord humongous, I mean, gosh almighty, he's a monster, I mean, so, he had respect, no doubt about it. I think you mentioned Billy Wicks, and I think Billy Wicks, he was in Memphis, Tennessee. He was a star there with my dad back in the 1960s when they really popped Memphis and made Memphis a huge wrestling town. Billy Wicks was one of those guys responsible for it. And somehow he became like a captain of the police force in Memphis, Tennessee. It must have been years later, but wow, he worked himself all the way to the top. Jerry Stubbs is another one of those guys you don't want to mess with, Jerry he's still in it. He's still doing it. And I think, and Leon, I don't think is with us anymore. I think we lost Leon this past year. Tarzan Baxter. And wow, what a great guy he was. And a policeman, big portion of his life. Going out there and helping other people and doing the right thing. And I think it's a real accomplishment to be a policeman and to do something for others, especially when your career is over as a wrestler. And some of them did it while they were wrestling. I mean, Humongous was doing it. He was in the business, and while he was wrestling, still wrestling, and I think probably Archie was too at the end. So, what a great question, though. I just think some guys are made for it. I think the good Lord wants that to happen, and every one of those guys you mentioned were just great at it. I have no doubt they were all just phenomenal at taking care of other people and doing the right thing. And wow, my hat's off to them. I respect those guys immensely, all of those guys, all 5 of them.
Our next question is from Johnny Morgan, Birmingham, Alabama. Had you taken the deal to go national with Continental, what would be the most obvious difference between the product now as opposed to that time?
Wow, what a great question, man. Y'all are hammering me today. This is good. The first thought that comes to my mind is there wouldn't be any difference in it. If I had stayed in it, I wouldn't have changed a darn thing. I wouldn't have taught my wrestlers to flip-flop and fly. I'd have taught them to just keep doing what they were doing. I mean, in the 1980s, the sport was absolutely on fire. I mean, every territory in the country, all the wrestling in the world was just doing great. And, somebody came along like Vince and he decides, well, we need to change it. And we need to have big muscle guys. And we need to have some flyers. And we need to have a bunch of false finishes that don't make sense. And nobody's finish hole meaning anything. I mean, they just went totally the wrong direction. And if I had got into it, I wouldn't have changed anything. I would have taken the best and I would have put them on that television program. And then I would have just kept training just like we were training. And what was happening is there weren't all these schools like there are out there nowadays that train wrestlers supposedly. And they teach them to do things that are totally unnecessary. In my opinion, that make no sense. Why would you run from one rope and a guy standing out there on the floor and dive over the top rope on him? I mean, he's going to move, right? He's not going to be there when you come down. You're going to land on the concrete. I mean, what they do it makes no sense at all anymore. What we did made perfect sense. And why change any of it? And that's what happened to the wrestling. Vince got in it and he said, let's change it. Let's make it different. Let's make it better. Well, it certainly was made different, but it wasn't made a darn bit better.
Our next question is from Craig Brinkley, Bristol, Florida. How do you handle loser-leave town matches in major markets that have the same card? Example, you show a video from Mobile on the TV show, but Dothan had the same card with the same loser-leaves town match.
Good question. Darn good question. Actually, in the Studcast, people are listening to the latest ones. We were down there and doing TV in Dothan, Alabama. We had 3 major markets, 3 television programs, but they overlap, but there was a very slight overlap in their signals. So the people in Montgomery didn't know what was going on in Mobile or Dothan, and people in Mobile didn't know what was going on in the other 2 cities. And so we used to put the same card into all 3 cities because you could then make your television program a generic show. It could promote the entire card, and you could have everybody doing interviews off of that same card, and that made it easier to do better interviews because your first interview you used to do, you probably weren't real happy with it, and the second one was better, and the third one was better. So the more interviews you got to do, the better they were. And you're going to be talking about the wrestling the same guy. So you had a loser-leave town match. And when you had the loser-leave town match, then you only taped that match in one of those 3 markets. Okay? So let's say in Mobile, you were doing what we were doing is because Mobile was such a tremendous wrestling city. My gosh, it was, averaging 7,000 people a show. And, there wasn't many cities in the country. And no city Mobile size was doing that, not even anywhere near it. And when we would tape those finishes in that one town and show those back on the TV, we didn't mention what happened in the other 2 cities. And what you did is you had a totally different finish in the other 2 cities. So in Mobile, let's say it was Bob Armstrong against a Mongolian Stomper, loser-leave town. And Bob's going to leave. One guy's going to leave. You can't beat both of them because they both have to go. So you got one guy that's going to leave, and the other one's going to stay. So the guy that's going to leave, let's say Bob beat Mongolian Stomper, and the Mongolian Stomper had to leave Mobile. Well, he also had the match with Bob Armstrong in Montgomery on a Monday, and he had that same match on a Friday night in Dothan with Bob, loser-leave town, and they just had a different ending. Match had a totally different ending. Was nothing like the Mobile match at all. And so there's your answer. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing to do, and it enabled you to be able to do loser-leave towns in all the matches rather than doing them just one. All the major markets got to see the same thing. So it was just a part of the way to do business. We kind of figured out that that's how to do it, and people never found out about it. And all they ever knew is my favorite guy. He lost and he's gone, or the hero I really wanted to get beat, he's lost and he's gone. So a great question, man. Really, really good question.
Our next question is from David Montgomery. How expensive were the title belts for your territories, and do you still have any belts, and which one?
All right. Yeah, well, boy, people are really, really into belts these days of time. I never thought that would happen. Back when I started wrestling, you didn't see anybody have a wrestling belt. And now it's wrestling belts, and what they stand for is really it's morphed into something bigger than I ever thought it would be. I mean, now you see them in football games. I mean, you got players that intercept a pass and makes a defensive play, and he runs and gets the belt, and he carries it all around the field, and it's in so many different sports nowadays, and other things in which wrestling belts are the thing, and I never believed that would be what would happen. I would have probably hung on to a lot of the belts that I had made. And I'll be honest with you, my man, this one right here is the only one I still have. And this is the United States Championship belt from 1988. And I've had all kinds of offers to buy it. I mean, I don't want to sell it. I plan on keeping it. It's the last belt I ever won. And it's going to be in my home forever, no doubt about that. But belts were expensive. This belt, 1988, cost $500. Now, I don't know what that is in today's money, but I'm telling you, it's money. The value of money goes up tremendously. That probably would equate to $10,000 maybe. The $800 or $500 or maybe $10,000 in today's money. They're expensive. They were always fairly expensive. You couldn't go out. Well, you could go out and get a cheap wrestling belt, but if you owned a wrestling company, why would you want to get a cheap wrestling belt? I mean, you want to get something that you're proud of, and it's going to make your company proud, and it's going to make the fans go, "Wow, that's a beautiful belt." The prices. I don't really know what the belts sell for. I hear these figures sometimes. Guys say, Ron, I bought this belt, and I paid $3,000 for it, and I'm like, what an achievement, what for? I mean, you're not even a real wrestler. I mean, you can't say, well, this is a belt I won, and it's. But I know it's big business, and I just. I just think that it's amazing what has happened with wrestling belts, and they have become extremely popular, and they're extremely expensive. Most of them, especially if you get a good one, and it depends on who made your belts. And this one was made by one of the best, and he was really, 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 really good at it, and he made a quality belt, and you knew when you had a belt made by him that you were going to get a really, really good product. Good question. Another good question. Wow. This is the belt. This is the only belt I still have, and I'm going to have it when I go.
Our next question is from Daryl Dotson, Asheville, North Carolina. Joe LeDuc and the Stomper was a classic feud. I remember waiting all week to watch Southeastern Wrestling to find out what was going to happen next. Absolutely brilliant booking. That's what's missing today. They want to rush everything, and most of the time it doesn't make any sense.
I have to agree kind of with that, sir. I'll tell you the truth. And before I go on, I want to apologize to Reggie. I don't think Reggie's still alive anymore, but Reggie Parks is the guy that made this belt. And in the South, he made this USA Tag Team Championship belt. So Reggie made quite a few belts for my companies. And I thought he was one of the best belt makers in the country. So let's get to your question here, sir. Boy, you were talking about the Stomper and Joe LeDuc. Those two guys were classics in their own style, man. They were unique individuals, and wow, they had some of the greatest matches I ever saw. I mean, but they weren't like regular wrestling matches. They were just brawls, a lot of blood, and but geez, fans just went nuts. It was unbelievable how fans got into those, and I can see what you were saying about wanting to find out what was going to happen next, and and that's where the sport's gone so badly in the wrong direction. Is they don't book anymore. The bookers, back in those days, the bookers spend a lot of time when they got two guys like Mongolian Stomper and Joe LeDuc that were working in the territory against each other. You wanted to do something special as much as you could, as many times as you could, and you wanted to do something outrageous, something that no one had ever seen before, and every booker, especially the great bookers, just it was almost every week they just came back with another one and another one and another one, and people would just. They were just like, I think you mentioned there, they were running to get to their television sets because what are they going to do this week? Kind of when we came up with the blockbusting idea, that turned out to be really a horrible deal for Joe. A really bad experience for Joe, but. When it's shown back, it's like nobody's ever seen it. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. Nobody had ever done anything like that. And when you, as a booker, can think of something that hasn't been done in wrestling, you are doing a heck of a job, because almost everything, they used to say, you can't do anything new. What are you going to do new? Well, gosh, me and my brother, when we were booking, that was all we were bent on. That just focused us in that direction. What do you mean you can't do something new? We were always coming up with something new, and that's what really was intriguing. And I agree with you, man. The bookers, there were no bookers anymore, and they don't do it anymore. I don't watch today's wrestling, so I really don't know whether they do a lot of angles or what they do, but back in the day, we were doing our darndest to make sure if you were a wrestling fan and you had 20 minutes to get home and that TV show was going to start at 2 o'clock, that you had your pedal to the metal. You wanted to get there and you wanted to see it, because you never knew, just like the gentleman said, you never knew when you were going to see something new.
Our next question is from Brian Worley. Ron, when Ron Wright worked for you in the 70s, I know he worked a full-time job in Kingsport, Tennessee. He was at a show of yours in Whitley City, Kentucky in the middle of the week. How did he juggle his time between wrestling and working a full-time job? I know he had a plane, which would make travel a lot easier. Just curious how he did that.
Ron Wright was a pretty unique person. Ron Wright was not only one of the hardest workers in the ring. He was obviously, I never saw him work in the factory. I think he was in the Kodak factory in Kingsport. But I'm pretty darn sure he was giving it all he could at his job every day. And that was very unusual for a wrestler to have a full-time job. It didn't happen very often, especially if he was a good wrestler and he could make a good living at wrestling. Most guys were just happy to make that living at just wrestling. But Ron Wright was a very unique guy. He was pretty amazing. He was an amazing character, Ron Wright. And those two cities you mentioned, Whitley City, Kentucky, is a very tiny little town. And Ron Wright had his airplane, and boy, I flew in it a few times. And well, I've talked about some of those flights, and I think back on them, and I'm lucky to be alive. That's the way I feel. Like a couple of times I didn't think we was going to make it, but he would fly into these towns, these small Kentucky towns that had these little tiny airports with these very short, little dinky runways. And wow, I don't know how he lived through it. I don't know how he made it. I really don't know how he made it through. And another thing here, the gentleman that asked me this, not all of his towns that he made were short runs. He used to go to Memphis from Kingsport, Tennessee to Memphis on a Monday night. And he would work, I'm sure he'd go into work at probably 7 o'clock in the morning. I think he wasn't just an average employee, he was a pretty high up in the Kodak company there. And he would go in there probably at 7 o'clock in the morning, come out of there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, run and get on his airplane and fly to Memphis, which is probably, it had to be close to 3 hours flying it. I mean, if you drove it, it was probably 8 hours, 9 hours. So, he'd fly for 3 hours. He'd land his plane at the big airport in Memphis. It was a big airport there where he could land his plane. And then he would come and wrestle, and he would get back into his airplane at probably 10 o'clock and fly till 1 o'clock and go to bed and probably be up by 5 the next morning to go to work again. Wow. He was a remarkable guy, Ron Wright, a remarkable guy. I had a lot of respect for Ron. He was a hard worker. And ask me, how did he do it? And I think that's the only answer there is. He was a hard worker, and he just did it. He made it happen.
Our next question is from Sean Whalen. Did you and Jerry Jarrett ever contemplate joining forces and making a run at Vince in the WWF?
Sean, yeah, we did. Actually, we did. 1988, I was doing USA Wrestling. Jerry Jarrett was over there starting to make trips into Texas out of Memphis, going into Dallas, working with the Von Erichs, and he got in touch with me, and he wanted to put together something that he thought might be able to compete with Vince. And what we did is we started talking to Vern Gagne in the AWA. And Vern was a old-timer, been around a long time. Business was already going down for almost everybody that was still running the territory and trying to run wrestling. They were already dropping off, and Vince was already taking his shots at some of their territories and trying to go in there and kill their territories for them. And I think Vince was one of the guys who was experiencing that, because Vince had a good territory, big territory. So we talked, the three of us, about how we might be able to do something. But in my case, the timing was all wrong. I had been in the business a long time. I had run 3 or 4 of my own territories. I had run the roads, and I dealt with trying to be the head guy and taking care of all of it, and being responsible for it all. I had burned out. I actually probably burned out about 1986 rather than 1988. And I have this chart that guys made for me. A couple of guys made me a chart of all of my matches from my career. And I noticed about 1986, in 1972, 73, 74, I was wrestling 320 times a year. and I don't know, that didn't include some TVs probably. So, really, really busting it. And I noticed by about 1986, I fell off to about 50 or 60 shows a year. So I had basically burned out, and I didn't really want to do it anymore. And so I went there as a favor for Jerry, and I knew Vern, and I had a relationship with his son, a good relationship with his son, and so I I went there expecting maybe, to give it one more big shot. But within about 2 months, I had to call them both up and tell them, guys, I'm done. I'm going to close my own last company, this belt right here, the USA company. I just ran it for 6 months, and I decided I've done it. I've done all I can do with wrestling, and it was changing so fast at that point. I could see the writing on the wall that you weren't going to be able to stay in business no matter what you did, basically, because you don't have that national program, you don't have all those connections, and you don't have all that money to be able to make it happen. So, I kind of walked away from Jerry and Vince and and Vern, and they both understood that. They weren't upset a bit about it. I think Vern went shortly after I did, and Jerry hung on till into the 90s, and really gave it his best shot, his very best shot. But and everybody knows what happened, so I think I got out at the right time.
Our next question is from Edward B. Robinson, Evergreen, Alabama. Did you or Robert or your father ever work with Buford Pusser?
Wow. Edward, that's a great question. And I got a feeling, Edward, a lot of people out there are going to go, who is Buford Pusser? But I tell you that Joe Don Baker, an old-time actor way back, played that part. Buford Pusser was a sheriff in a little small county in Alabama, and the bad guys wanted to get him, man, and they were all on him all the time, and they all after him, and I think they killed his wife, or they certainly shot her and almost killed her. I mean, it's a great story, and the name of it was Walking Tall. And Joe Don Baker did it, but then another dude came along that we all know who is for sure, The Rock. The Rock played the part of Buford Pusser in Walking Tall. And, Rock's a pretty darn good actor, and he did a darn good job, but I don't know, Joe Don Baker might have been even a little better, man, as Buford Pusser, but Buford Pusser had a great story. That was a great story, and that's why it ended up being 2 movies made out of it. And it may be somewhere close to where you live, Edward. You live down there in Evergreen, Alabama, I think it is. And I have no idea exactly how far that is from Buford Pusser country, but you ask if me, Rob, or Dad had any relations with it, and actually Rob did. And Rob got, when Buford was ending up his law career, his officer career, he wanted to get into wrestling. And so Jimmy Golden's father, Bill Golden, ran Montgomery, Alabama. And that must be somewhere close to Buford country, because somehow Buford got hooked up with Bill Golden and started refereeing. He was refereeing a lot of matches for Bill Golden in Montgomery, Alabama, and that Montgomery had a little territory around Montgomery. And Robert was there doing some booking for Bill Golden when he was real young. Rob and Jimmy were probably 18, 19 years old. Both of them were wrestling. And Buford Pusser was doing the refereeing in a whole lot of their matches. So, what a great question, though, Edward. I mean, I don't know how many people really are aware of him, but if they look it up now and they find out Walking Tall was a heck of a movie, and it had to be a good story, or they certainly would have made 2 movies out of it. So, great question, Edward.
Our next question is from Phil Lynott, New Brunswick, Canada. During the 1984 Maritime Wrestling War, when one of the promoters brought Joe LeDuc in to compete with the Mongolian Stomper, pulling of the bust tape was shown in advance to his arrival. Unfortunately, the blockbusting footage was not used. Would wrestlers generally have to ask permission to use the footage from a territory, or was there an understanding that if it featured you, you shared the rights to it?
Well, Mr. Lynott, that's a great question. And obviously you listening to up-to-date studcasts, because basically that's what I've been talking a lot about is about this angle with Joe LeDuc and the Mongolian Stomper, and how we took the tapes from Tennessee, actual tapes of the blockbusting incident is an example, and put it on television in Dothan, Alabama, in the Gulf Coast Territory 3 years later, 1980. And she's just as powerful, it may be more powerful the second go around than it was the first time. Joe LeDuc was a uniquely, he was a monster. He was so strong, it was unbelievable. And he actually pulled the bus twice. He pulled the bus for us in Knoxville, and he pulled the bus for us again when he came to work in the Gulf Coast Territory, after he had gotten his neck hurt doing the blockbusting thing. And I wasn't aware, in the Maritimes down there, up there in Canada. I think you're out of Canada, New Brunswick, Canada, maybe. You're out there, in that beautiful part of the country, man. I've had all these wrestlers that wrestle up in that area and say, Ron, if Nova Scotia, I mean, you go up there, man, it's beautiful, great place. Les Thatcher, for years, harped on working in that part of the world. And so, and I didn't know that they had a war there in '84, and I feel bad about it, bad for them, because I didn't have a very good experience from my war in '79. So, so I can see that if they must have been competing very strongly if they had already had Stomper there and they brought in Joe LeDuc. And I'm sure people had told them, hey, these two guys worked this angle down there in Tennessee, and it set that territory on fire, and it made that territory a huge territory. And they probably had heard all that. And I think the question was that they ran the bus, pulling the bus tape, but they didn't run the actual blockbusting tape. And there's probably a reason for that, because maybe they couldn't lay their hands on it. They couldn't find it. It wasn't something, nowadays stuff's on YouTube and it's all out there and you can go and find pretty much everything. But back in those days, it was not the case. I was lucky to be able to use it again in the second territory. And that's only because I'm the one that originally did it. So and when you did something like that, you didn't want people copying you, And wow, that was such a tremendous angle, that first blockbusting deal where they both busted the blocks on their heads, and Joe got hurt big time and was out for a long time, and it really affected his life, and I hated that, and I told him that we didn't want to do it, we were scared of it, and he and Archie just wanted to do it. They just demanded it. We can do it. We want to do it. We want to do this. So yeah, and so and obviously. I would let either one of those guys, obviously, use those tapes anywhere they wanted to, because they did it. I didn't do it. I didn't go sit down in the middle of that ring and put a block on my head and let somebody hit me with a sledgehammer. I mean, I respected both of those guys tremendously, and sure, I let him use that. I let Joe use that, and I don't know why he didn't ask for the blockbusting tape as well. Because once you showed both of those tapes in the studcast that I've been doing, we're in that time frame now, in early January of 1980, And we brought Joe in there, and the Stomper has been in the territory, and Joe comes into the territory, and people don't know Joe the Duke, and wow, we talked a little bit about those type of matches those guys had. I mean, wow, nobody had those kind of matches anywhere in the country. It was just unbelievable what they would do to each other in the blood, and their heads were just patched up all the time. It was unbelievable what they were willing to give for the wrestling business. And so, I'm sorry that they didn't get that second tape, and I don't know the results of your war up there, but I do know that whoever had Archie and Joe the Duke, those guys won the war.
Our next question is from William Aarons, Muncie Valley, PA. Hey Stud, do you plan on doing any autograph or legend shows in 2024? I think a Southeastern reunion show would be great.
I think a Southeastern reunion show would be great too. I gotta agree with you, but I don't know that I'm going to be the one to do it. I mean, there's a huge commitment to doing one of those type of shows. Wow, a lot of work. And I have some events. Yeah, I'm going to have some events in 2024. I've got a couple on schedule now. I've got one in Alabama, Oxford, Alabama. I think it's March the 23rd, 2024, and I'm going to be there on the same card with Wendell Cooley and Scott Armstrong. There's going to be a couple guys on that card as well. And then I don't know any of the other wrestlers that are going to be on it, but and then I will get other bookings between now and then. And I'm actually on February the 13th going to Fort Lauderdale to visit with some guys that out of that area that call themselves the Smart Marks, and they're flying me in there and putting me up and. Gonna treat me great, and I'm gonna tell them stories for about 3 hours, and I do all kinds of different things. I got some fans that are whatever they ask for. I like to do shows whenever I can, but while doing that Southeastern deal and doing it right is I looked at it. I really considered it 2 years ago. When I first came back to Tennessee, I wanted to do it that first year, maybe in April or May of that first year, a Southeastern reunion, and have people from all over the country, wrestlers from all over the country. And I still think it would be a great idea. I still think it would be hugely successful. It might draw as many as 10,000 people over a weekend. But I got too much going on. I'd have to miss this Ask the Stud. I couldn't do maybe 2 or 3 Ask the Studs. I'd give up that to try to spend more time to put something like that together. But I've reached a point where I don't want to get that involved in things anymore. I'd have to get a guy like Les Thatcher. I'd need 3 Les Thatchers to be able to do the legwork to make something like that happen. But it's a good question, and I'm out there. Those that are available, those people that are interested, I still do podcasts frequently for other people, and I obviously spend a heck of a lot of time on my Studcast and shows like this show here, and piecing together YouTube and short rides and all the things that we do. So I'm pretty busy. I'll be too busy to do a Southeastern reunion, but great question either way, man. And I appreciate the fact that you'd consider that. You'd probably come, I think.
Our next question is from Elwood Sandridge, Weewahitchka, Florida. Ron, while you were wrestling full-time in Florida, what was your routine during the day? Did you have any superstitions you did before a match?
Great. That's a great question, Elwood. And I guess you're supposed to have some kind of superstition, some kind of thing you usually do, but I gotta say no. As I recall, I didn't have anything that I routinely did before each match. Other than sometimes go and apologize to whoever I'm wrestling because I'm going to be stiff. That's about as close as a superstitious deal that I would do. I might should have done that more often. But as far as my daily schedule in Florida, I was a young guy when I started wrestling. I was just out of college, 22, and lived in Florida. And I'd gone to school at Miami, University of Miami, and I was used to the beach, man. As a young guy, started at 18. I showed up down there in Miami and spent 4 years in the sun, man. And I got that became a routine for me. That alone, and I remember when I was playing on the basketball team there, that I used to go out and the beach was probably 10 miles away, and I would go out and they had a big lawn area out by the dorm that I was in, and I would take a towel and put it down on the grass, and I would lay out there and I'd get one of those things that used to have the sun shades that you pull the shade up like this and you held it underneath your chin and you got your face all brown. And so I was the brownest guy on the basketball team. I mean, nobody got in the sun at all, hardly, none of the other guys but me. And wow, it was so cool. I really enjoyed this, and so did my teammates. They really loved it. Every time that we went north, and we'd come out of those dressing rooms in Pittsburgh and big cities in the north, and I would come last, and I'd let everybody go in first in front of me, and they would all come out, and we had these tight-fitting tops, warm-up tops that, as soon as you got out of the dressing room, you went to the bench, you pulled off the top, and then you started doing the layups or whatever it was. That was kind of like the routine. But when we came out of the dressing room, everybody, there would be no response from the crowd until I came out. When I came out, I was all brown in the face. It was University of Miami, right? And so, I figured, well, somebody here needs to look like they go to school in Miami. And so, and then I would go to the bench, and everybody else would have their shirts off already, and then I would get mine, and it fit so tight I would have to strain, and I would get my pop the muscles all I could, and then they could see the whole tan, and those buildings would explode. Oh, I was a heel. I was an instant heel. I loved it. It was unbelievable. Oh, they screamed, oh, surfer boy. Oh, they had all these things, and they would throw things on the court. I mean, wow. It was so, that was kind of my routine. I kept my routine. After I finished college, I went down to Florida again, and I would go to the beach every chance I could. Went to the gym. I didn't go to the gym as much as I should have. I should have spent more time in the gym and less time in the sun. And it probably would have benefited me even more. Although I did pretty good for my first 3 years in the sport, I ended up being able to go into St. Louis and wrestle some of the greatest talent in the world, and and kind of being looked at as being a potential world champion. And I accomplished a lot in those first years, but my routine every day was, sun. The sun was in it, even if there was a gym in it too. I would spend that hour in the gym or hour and a half in the gym, but then I'd go from the gym to the beach or wherever it was, and I usually like to walk the beach. I do have a routine. I got to think about it. I've been trying to think here, Elwood. I think that was the name. I did have a routine that I did every time, every night, every city. And I know Rob and Jimmy were sitting here right now, they'd be saying, "You walked, Ron." That's what your routine was. You walked back and forth and back and forth. And so that was my routine. If I had a routine every night in every town, everywhere I wrestled, it was the fact that I just walked back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Our next question is from Glenn David Sanders, Pikeville, Kentucky. Did you ever have anyone refuse to lose a match or refuse to drop a belt to a particular opponent?
No, I never had that experience, Glenn. I'm happy to say, I mean, I wouldn't have liked that experience, and probably because first 2 years we did. I just talked and answered a question about my time in Florida, and one thing I did mention is I was spending quite a bit of time in the snake pit in the early years, 1970 and 71. I was in the snake pit 3 days a week, probably in the morning, early in the mornings, man, and going through that was something else. But going through that is a lot of the reasons why I never had any problem with anybody in the ring, because people talk, telephone, telegram, tell a wrestler was the old saying, and you didn't. Wrestlers talk to each other, and being in the snake pit, and the fact that you were there and you were going through it and you were learning how to hurt people, made guys not want to have a problem. It wouldn't be worth it probably. They figured, wow, I don't know if I ought to do that. And then secondly, once I got my own businesses, I mean, and you're a booker, it didn't happen. I mean, if it did happen, it shouldn't have happened, and it never happened. I mean, I think people had enough respect for me as a booker to go, whatever you want to do. I mean, not wait a minute, I ain't going to do that. So I never got an I ain't going to do that, and it wouldn't have been a good thing. Guys certainly would have been gone quick. You would have been an instant notice, but it could have turned into something worse. That would have been bad. But it was really an experience, and I never had to experience that. I'm happy to say I never had to experience having that happen to me, and I saw on a few occasions when it did happen in other territories. But I guess, man, I just made up my mind that that's never going to happen in my territory, and and it certainly never happened to me individually either. But that's a darn good question. I mean, guys that were serious about being wrestlers, they knew not to do it. They knew that that's a no-no, and that's only going to put you in a bad light, and it's not what the wrestling business is all about.
Our final question is from Steve on Twitter, now X. What happened to Stomper's son? I was 11 years old in 1980 and don't remember him at all. Did he leave the business after leaving the territory?
Well, again, this comes from Steve. Obviously, you listen to present day Studcast, and Mongolian Stomper's son was working partners with him in the Gulf Coast Territory, Southeastern Tag Champions, and he was young. His dad was carrying him, and that's the way a lot of young wrestlers got their start. is if they had a father they wrestled partners with their father, and their father kind of took for them and got them into the ring when they needed to be and out when they needed to be. And so Archie was doing that for him. The Stomper was doing that for him, but I think he got homesick a little bit for Tennessee. He's down there on the Gulf Coast, and it's his first territory he ever worked, and he's never worked that much. A lot of reasons for him to get complacent and get unhappy, want to go home, basically. And so he did. We sent him home, and we let him go home. And I don't think he ever wrestled in another territory after that either. I think you asked, did he leave and go somewhere else? I don't think he ever went anywhere else. Some guys are just not cut out for it. And you would expect maybe that Mongolian Stomper's son would be, but he wasn't. He was not an Archie. He was not like Archie in the ring, and he didn't have the want to, and without the want to, there was no way you were going to make a way.